Ken was a complete loner who was living a purposeless life until he was accidentally isekai'd as a hero with rare healing magic. However, when a muscle mommy hears of this, she kidnaps him to train him to become a freaky healer that can heal allies by touching them and clap his enemies with his ding-dong. It all begins with Ken dreaming about living a cooler life when it suddenly starts to rain. He quickly seeks shelter in the shed where he is greeted by the two most popular kids, Suzuna and Kazuki, who politely offer to share their umbrellas with him. This surprises Ken, who had assumed that both Kazuki and Suzuna would be cold-hearted jerks since they're not only good students but are also famous unlike him. As they begin walking together, Ken starts to vibe with the popular kids, realizing they're actually very humble and chill. Just then, Kazuki and Suzuna become confused as they complain about hearing a sound of bells ringing. Trying to hear the bells too, Ken tries to get close to them when suddenly a magic circle opens up, transporting them in another world. There they're greeted by King Leode, the ruler of Linger. He apologizes for causing them inconvenience, but reveals they are summoned to become the heroes Linger needs, since they were attacked by the King of Demons. Ken is visibly shaken by the events, but then he turns to look at Suzuna, who appears excited. However, Kazuki gets angry and demands to be teleported back to Japan. The king unfortunately reveals that the teleportation only works once, which infuriates Kazuki further until Leode kneels before him in shame, promising that he'll find a way to send them back to their world. Breaking the silence, Suzuna asks the king why he addresses them as heroes when he knows nothing about them. His royal advisor, Welsi, replies that the summoning circle is designed in a way that only selects accomplished individuals. When she points out that the chosen heroes must have heard bells, Ken blankly states that he didn't hear anything, which means he was never meant to be here. At that moment, Ken realizes he's just Ken. Welsi then calls for the gang to test their magic affinity. Suzuna learns she has an affinity for thunder magic, while Kazuki finds out he can use light magic. Finally, when it's Ken's turn, the magic ball gleams with green light. Horrified, Welsi drags Ken to Leode, revealing the whole matter to him. After learning everything, Leode is also gripped with fear and stresses that Ken should be sent far away from Linger before he is discovered by one that shall not be named. Confused, Ken wonders if Voldemort is out to get him when the door swings open and a baddie named Rose enters, scaring everyone including the king. The whole room falls silent while Rose glances at Ken and blankly introduces herself as the leader of the rescue team. Despite being intimidated by her, Ken wondered if she'd give prior to the anaconda in his pants. Just as Rose is leaving, Ken asks Leode and Welsi why the magic circle gleamed green. Rose stops in her tracks and tells everyone she is taking Ken with her, but Welsi acts quicker by putting him in a protective bubble and sending him away. However, that doesn't stop Rose as she becomes Usain Bolt and grabs Ken, announcing to everyone that she's going to take Ken with her and turn him into a full-on healer. Later on, Welsi reveals to Kazuki and Suzuna that Ken is a healer, which is extremely rare. That's why he will be working with Rose, who is another healer. Suzuna notes that it doesn't sound like a pickle until Welsi reveals that Rose's training methods are extremely brutal and tough. Elsewhere, Rose brings Ken to his new home where he is greeted by a group of Rose's ugly subordinates. Upon seeing Ken, they try to intimidate him by telling him he is dead meat. Rose kicks them and reveals to Ken that these guys aren't healers but play an important role in the rescue team, as in war, they bring the injured back to camp. With that, she announces training starts tomorrow, which only sends shivers down Ken's spine. As morning arrives, Ken sees one of Rose's lackeys, Tong, sleeping, making him realize that he really is in another world. Just then, Ken gets visited by Suzuna and Kazuki, who express their worry upon seeing him. Ken smiles, realizing the popular kids consider him a friend until he recalls that his training with Rose will start today. Seeing him filled with dread, Suzuna assures him that if he could survive Matt's class, he can easily survive whatever Rose has planned for him. With that, she reveals that she and Kazuki will also be starting their training. After prolonged silence, Kazuki suddenly grabs Ken's shoulder, stating that he will do his best, which makes Suzuna and Ken smile at his enthusiasm. As they leave, Ken realizes that adjusting in this world must be harder for a Chad like Kazuki, since he was about to become the prom king. Just then, Rose pokes her head out and asks if the heroes have left. Seeing her, Ken becomes straighter than the pole your mom dances on. He bows in fear, which prompts Rose to blankly reveal that this isn't a prison and he doesn't have to act like a goofy goober to appease her. After that, she throws a diary at him and tells Ken that whenever he misses mommy, he can cry about it to Dear Diary. A few hours later, Ken meets Rose to begin his training. He recalls how Tong and the other Smash Bros told him training with Rose is going to be super hard, but for now, everything seems perfect. Rose then orders him to unleash the mana in his body. When he fails to, Rose throws a book at him and tells the illiterate loser to read. To Ken's surprise, he is able to comprehend the language of Linger, which prompts Rose to reveal that the heroes of another world have this ability from the get-go. She then shows him how the Demon King's territory is right in front of Linger, which makes their kingdom an easy target. For the next 2 days, Rose orders Ken to run like he's a baby daddy of 4 kids, but when his legs can no longer take it, Rose calls him a piece of trash. She also heals his muscles so he can become one with the wind again. By day 4, Ken trains with the rest of the lackeys so he can look handsome for once in his life. To his dismay, even the NPCs outdo him, which makes him extremely bitter. On day 7, Ken runs, but even then, Rose is unhappy with him, so she kicks him. After being kicked and thrashed around for a few days straight, Ken realizes that Rose should be called a cactus since she is a prick. He also manages to unleash a bit of healing light, which he uses to heal himself after receiving injuries from Rose. Thanks to his newfound power, Ken begins to run without complaining because the moment he gets tired, he uses healing light to heal his muscles. However, he also wonders if he'll be able to match up to Kazuki and Suzuna's level if all he does is run. On day 11, Rose makes Ken train his upper body so he can get yummy biceps. During the workout, Rose asks him if he knows why she is making him train his body so hard. When Ken remains quiet, she reveals that it's because she wants him to run from the enemy as fast as possible because on the battlefield, he needs to not only save himself, but also help his injured allies. Upon hearing that, Ken becomes more focused in doing his training. Eventually, the day comes when his body becomes equipped for all the running and upper body workouts, so Rose makes him train with weights. On day 14, Ken arrives at the mess and finds out Tong has eaten his lunch. Furious, he chases him like a street dog despite wearing a plate of weights. A week later, Suzuna and Kazuki arrive to meet Ken. However, when they find him working out, they are instantly shocked. To push Ken to his limits, Rose adds 2 blocks of weight on his back, and when she sees him giving perfect push-ups, she tells him that he is finally becoming a man she'd want to breed with. In the meantime, Suzuna becomes wet seeing Ken's bicep pump. Kazuki, on the other hand, is concerned about his well-being. Suddenly, the royal guard accompanying the princess and the 2 heroes grab Rose by the collar. Siglas angrily argues that she is wrecking Ken's mind and body. Calmly, Rose tells Siglas that he can shove his morals, as she will be the one to decide how she trains Ken. After all, he will become his right-hand man. Everyone present on the site, including Ken, is surprised as Rose continues, revealing that Ken has a fire which stops him from giving up. This makes him a perfect fit for her most trusted ally. With that, she tells Ken to relax with his friend while she handles old Siglas. Following orders, Ken takes Suzuna and Kazuki to a meadow where he learns Siglas is actually the strongest knight in the kingdom who commands the army of Linger. His attention then turns to the princess, who quickly introduces herself as Celia. After a while, Kazuki asks Ken if he usually has high-intense training. To his surprise, Ken reveals that today's training was super light. When he asks about his training, Kazuki informs him that while the training itself is difficult, Wellesley makes sure they are well rested and taken care of. Ken is glad to hear that, stating that it's Rose who is a brutal maniac. For some reason, hearing this, Kazuki becomes apologetic and tells Ken that he is sorry. Before he can ask why he is behaving like Debbie Downer, Suzuna tries to diddle him by lifting up his shirt when Kazuki asks him if it's hard for him. Ken admits that it is, and he wanted to run away in the beginning, but now he is starting to enjoy his training. Pleased by his answer, Kazuki makes up his mind to train harder than before. The next day, Rose tells Ken they're going outside. Without waiting for him, she tells a young knight called Thomas to open the gate as she wants to show Ken what's outside the walls. Having seen Attack on Titan, Ken becomes nervous. Soon they arrive at a forest which is infamous for monster activity. Without a second thought, Rose throws Ken towards the forest, telling him to hunt some grizzlies for her. As Ken takes flight, he realizes he is never going to get a sloppy toppy by a fury baddie thanks to Rose and her orthodox training method. Luckily, he remembers that he can now activate healing light, so he uses that and saves himself from getting pancaked. However, now in the forest, Ken worries about catching a grand grizzly. He tries to uplift his spirits by assuring himself that he can easily take a bear down now that he has hard abs, yet the moment he sees the grizzly, he starts to run like his life depends on it. After running like the guy from Temple Run, Ken decides to face his enemy head-on. He challenges the grizzly to come at him, but the bear calls his friends, which sends Ken running once again. To save his hide, Ken takes a dive in the waterfall and arrives safely on the bank. The next day, he starts his hunt for a grand grizzly again. This time, he becomes determined to learn more about his enemies, so he tries to suss out the grizzly's hideout. However, while searching for the bear's den, Ken stumbles upon an injured rabbit. Noticing how cute he is, Ken quickly uses his healing light to heal the little guy, and to his surprise, the rabbit begins following him. He tries to send the cutie away as he doesn't want him getting hurt during his bear hunt, but the rabbit refuses and tails after him. It later dawns to Ken that the rabbit wants to show him where the grand grizzly lies as a form of payment. A few seconds later, Ken finds the den thanks to the rabbit. He notices the grizzlies sleeping together, making him realize that the bears move in a pack. On day 3, Ken finds companionship in the bunny, and together they keep a watchful eye on the grizzlies. The next day, Ken winces in pain, realizing that the lake water he had been drinking was probably filled with monster pee. Luckily, his new friend guides him to a pond which contains clear water. As Ken drinks from it, he notices the rabbit looking all scared. Before he can ask him what's wrong, the bunny jumps on a tree and signals Ken to join him. When he does, Ken's eyes widen as he watches a giant anaconda slithering through the trees. Despite having never read about this creature before, Ken comes to the conclusion that this snake wants blood. A few days later, Ken keeps an eye on the family of grizzlies like usual. However, he starts finding them cute until he recalls that without defeating the grand grizzly he cannot go home, so he makes up his mind to challenge the bear tomorrow. The following day, it starts to pour and Ken's new friend begs him not to go hunting today. Sighing, Ken tells the little guy he'll wait until the rain stops. Once it stops pouring, Ken takes determined steps towards the grizzly's den despite his friend's disagreement. However, the moment he arrives in the den, he finds the entire family of grizzly annihilated. Ken becomes nervous, realizing Rose will probably kick his nuts for letting someone else steal his prey. He then notices the bite marks on the deceased grizzlies and reaches the conclusion that it must be the work of that giant pinworm. The more he studies the corpses, the more Ken comes to know how dangerous the snake really is, since he eliminated the bears just for funsies. Suddenly, the last remaining cub arrives on the scene and finds his parents dead. As he cries, Ken thinks how he had to harden his heart to appease Rose, but it's all for nothing. The more he hears the cub cry, the more determined Ken becomes to take down that monstrous snake. In the meantime, Suzuna and Kazuki arrive to check up on their friend, only to learn he is training in the dark forest for 10 whole days. Kazuki becomes worried, which doesn't go unnoticed by Suzuna, so she assures him by saying that Ken is like a cockroach and would survive anything. Back inside the forest, Ken trains like Muhammad Ali for his face-off with the snake. He asks the rabbit to show him to the monster's hideaway and then orders him to run the moment he starts fighting him. The bunny agrees and brings Ken to the snake, and to his surprise, he finds the cub fighting the snake for what he did to his parents. Ken shudders at the sight of the snake, but ultimately realizes he is still not as scary as his trainer. So he hardens his nuts and charges at the snake and manages to blind him in one eye. To Ken's dismay, the injury doesn't stop the snake from chomping his arm. Screaming in pain, Ken uses healing light and pushes his body to stab the snake despite everything. Once the monster lets go of his arm, Ken grows dizzy, realizing he has been poisoned by the snake's venom. Ken calls the snake a cheater and tells him that he hasn't won since he now knows how to heal himself from poison. With newfound determination, Ken charges at the snake again. This time the cub lends a hand and together they manage to finally take down the beast. As Ken catches a breath, trying to stabilize his body, he receives love from the cub when suddenly the snake rises up again. The cub, worried for Ken, tries to drag him away while Ken faces death up close. He says his goodbyes to his friends and then loudly curses Rose when suddenly she arrives and sends the snake straight to hell. Surprise, Ken asks why she is here, and Rose proudly reveals the bunny he had befriended is actually her pet kukuru, who revealed everything to her. She also tells him that she was always watching him, but even she was surprised to see the monster snake. Ken, curious, asks if she knows the beast, and Rose informs him that the snake was created by the Demon King's army, and even the strongest knight, Siglas, failed to eliminate it. Hearing this, Ken curses out Rose for sending a rookie like him in a dangerous forest, which makes the grizzly cub angry on his behalf. Seeing this, Rose smiles and tells the cub that from now on, he has a master. The cub agrees, takes Ken on his back, but Rose decides to show them who is the boss and swings them all on her back. She tells Ken that she heard him call an ugly gorilla, so he better prepare for the nut-cracking punishment later on. After a while, Rose commends Ken for clearing her test, revealing that the 2 healers she had early on failed. With that, she tells him to prepare himself. The demon army is coming. Ken asks Rose if she is sure about a war starting soon. Rose affirms, further revealing that he will be on the front lines with her, healing the wounded. Terrified out of his dumb mind, Ken asks why Tong and the other NPCs aren't on the front lines. Rose states that while there are other 2 healers, they will be stationed with Tong and the rest elsewhere. Rattled by the news, Ken admits that he is not as strong as her, causing Rose to announce that he needs to become strong in what little time they have left. Meanwhile, in the Demon King's castle, a loyal knight informs her king that preparations for war are almost over. The Demon King coldly tells the thoughty knight that if she doesn't win on his behalf, she'll get clapped by him. The knight, Amila, assures the Demon King that she will do her best, which pleases him. Exiting the room, Amila breathes a sigh of relief when the demon doctor arrives, mocking her for being nervous despite being the honorable third commander of the army. The weirdo named Heroic further teases Amila, making his crush on her very obvious. To get her attention, Heroic tells Amila that he is almost done creating the newest demon-made monster prototype and asks Amila if she wants to come with him to his basement. Amila being dummy thick, she follows Heroic, who proudly shows the monster prototype called Baljanak. As it turns out, Baljanak is the exact replica of the snake which Ken and Rose hunted down. Amila also points out that he isn't creative enough, which ticks off Heroic, who yaps about Baljanak being much stronger than its predecessor. Amila, now uninterested, tells Heroic that she hopes he doesn't let her down as she wants to destroy the whole of Linger. Smirking, Heroic asks her if she is talking about the kidnappers, which causes her to grit her teeth in anger. She states that she hates the kidnappers the most as they carry the injured away to the rear before she can sell their organs on the dark web. But more than her hatred for the kidnappers, she loathes their leader Rose, who heals everyone on spot and can even put up a great fight, something Sakura Haruno can only dream of.
Emotional, damn it!
After sensing the bitterness from Amila, Heroic warns her that she cannot go after Rose since she will be commanding the army. Amila sighs, saying she knows, and that's why she will be sending the demon known as the Black Knight to hunt down Rose. Back in Linger, Ken hugs his pillow, grateful to be back in his bed. Later on, he checks up on his pet and brings in food from the cafeteria. When he sees Kukuru, Ken pouts and tells him that he made a fool out of him just like your ex did. To manipulate him again, Kukuru puts on his best cute face, which Ken falls for once again. In the end, Kukuru wins and gets a treat from Ken. Seeing this, the bear cub tells him to feed him too, which he does, but then Ken realizes that he needs a name too, so he names him Blurrin. Rose hears the name and tells Ken that he is so bad at names that she is sure his future kids will get bullied. Ignoring her, Ken remains proud until Rose reveals that the king allowed him to keep Blurrin, but he must earn his keep. Hearing this, Blurrin becomes terrified, which makes Rose happy since it's not like he can call his parents on her. Ken comes to diffuse the attention and asks what she wants Blurrin to do. So, Rose tells Ken to carry Blurrin on his shoulders, imagining that it's an injured person. This would help him gain perspective of a real-life scenario in the battlefield. With that, she barks at him to run and Ken begins to run. However, this time, he is more confident than ever as he thinks that he just needs to manage his mana and he'll be goofy. Suddenly, Ton creeps up on him, and then the others join in quickly. Confused, Ken asks what they are doing, causing the NPCs to reveal they are simulating the battlefield, as it won't be easy saving himself and his wounded allies in the real case. An hour later, Ken faces stink bombs designed to throw him off. 4 hours later, Ken starts feeling weird and falls on the ground. While resting, Ken notes to himself that he thought he would last more than just 4 hours when Rose arrives and reveals that he needs to remember that humans feel all sorts of emotions like exhaustion, fear, and nervousness at the battlefield. These emotions also have an impact on one's body, often slowing them down. When Ken asks what he should do, Rose tells him to build mental strength so he doesn't falter in the face of fear. Once she is done healing him, she tells Ken that he needs to run in Castle Town with Blurrin on his back. Following orders, Ken resumes his training, catching attention from the townsfolk. As they whisper about Blurrin, Ken sighs knowing they are scared of a blue grizzly, which is known as a monster. However, the people quickly realize Ken is one of the heroes, which allows them unclench their glutes. In the meantime, Blurrin wakes up from his slumber and tells Ken to buy him the fruits he had earlier. Ken stops at a fruit shop and asks the old lady about the fruit, and she reveals they are called Peffles, a specialty of Linger. He then asks the MILF why everyone is so relaxed when he is literally carrying a monster on his back. The MILF smiles and says that everyone knows he is from the rescue team as he is wearing that ugly piss yellow t-shirt. Thanking the MILF, Ken decides to pay his friends a visit when a man runs after him and eventually falls down, unable to keep up. This catches Ken's attention and he finally pays the blondie some attention. While healing him, Ken learns the man is named Orga and is another healer in the rescue team. As the two boys get to talking, Orga tells Ken he surely has balls of steel for keeping up with Rose's training since he and his younger sister couldn't. He further reveals that he has a clinic in town which he uses to help the peasants. Ken then points out that if he is a healer, why couldn't he heal himself earlier, and Orga admits that he can heal others but not himself. More curious than ever, Ken asks Orga what role he plays in the battlefield, so he reveals that Tong and the rest carry the injured soldiers to the rear. Then him and his sister start working their mojo. This prompts Ken to admit that Rose asked him to join her in the front lines, but he is not sure about his abilities as a healer yet. Orga's face turns serious as he tells Ken that it's always the knights and the heroes fighting on the front lines. Since they are always facing greater risk, if they get injured, they will end up perishing. But if there are healers, they can be saved. This is why Rose chose him, because she knows it's an exhaustive job and yet she trusts him to back her up. After having a chat with Orga, Ken arrives at the castle and is greeted by Suzuna, who is excited to see Blurrin. As they get talking, Ken notices her bruised hand from sword training and uses healing light on her, which puts the shoddy in ovulation mode. She asks Ken if he came to see, and he casually reveals that he wanted to meet her and Kazuki. Suzuna tells Ken that he is never getting laid and then reveals Kazuki is out hunting in the forest with Siglas. Later that night, Ken tells Rose that when she asked him to join her in the front lines, he was scared, but now he wants to do everything he can to help. However, he admits that he can't fight and can't slay anyone as he is only capable of being a healer. Rose tells Ken that she always knew he was a wussy, but that's okay as his only job is to keep their allies alive. For the first time, Ken starts to feel like an integral part of the rescue team. The next day, Rose wakes him up, revealing that the king has ordered him to join Suzuna in her monster hunting training. As they head out to meet the rest of the group, Ken asks Rose why he is ordered to join Suzuna suddenly. She reveals that the king had asked him to join Kazuki's group as well, but she had refused on his behalf since he had just returned from the forest. But now, the king has asked again, and she can't afford to refuse the old man for the second time. As they meet up with Suzuna's group, she excitedly asks Ken if he brought Blurrin so she'd be happy. To her dismay, Ken bluntly states that Blurrin only likes him so he can't afford to leave him alone. Pouting hard, Suzuna tries to mask her embarrassment by introducing Ken to the rest of her team, Aruku the knight and Korin the mage. Rose then tells the whole group that while Ken can heal wounds and poison, ultimately his skills are useless if they all get yeeted. So she warns them to not overestimate Ken's abilities and put themselves in unnecessary danger. Ken looks at Rose blankly, hoping to get a word of wisdom tailored for him, but Rose ignores him like all the baddies ignore you. Elsewhere, Kazuki trains with his sword when Celia intercepts him and tells him to rest. He assures the princess he is fine, which only prompts Celia to state that if he wants to work out so badly, then she can book a honeymoon suit and he can whip out his fat black sword, which she loves. Meanwhile, as Suzuna's group arrives near the forest, Ken worries that Blurrin might feel depressed going back to the place where his family was murdered. For now, Blurrin sleeps comfortably on his back, but suddenly, Suzuna tries to pet him. Ken intercepts her in time and tells her to keep her filthy hands away from his teddy bear. Blurrin wakes up shortly after that, so Ken tells him to walk on his own. Suzuna seizes this opportunity and ushers him to get on her back. However, the moment he does that, Suzuna realizes that Blurrin is a big chungus in bear form. Once they arrive in the forest, Korin immediately detects foul presence, and seconds later, the group finds themselves ambushed by bandits. Seeing them use the same trashy lines to sound scary, Ken thinks how he can easily take everyone on, while Suzuna gushes with excitement over seeing real bandits. She shares this with Ken, revealing that in Japan, her biggest fear was Discord mods and weaves, but in Linger, they have actual thugs. Seeing the commotion, Blurrin curiously looks at the bandits, which scares them. However, their leader, The Rock, assures his mates that the blue grizzly can't harm them since he's just a cub. With regained morale, they try to snatch Blurrin for his pelt when Suzuna uses thunder magic to teach them a lesson. Amazed by her skills, Ken urges Suzuna to go crazy with her powers, and if by chance she goes overboard, he would just use his healing light. Taking his advice, Suzuna goes all out while Ken cheers and calls her a human eel. Just when the group is about to take the final boss, a horde of fall boars come crashing out. One of the boar charges straight towards Suzuna, but before he can do her harm, Ken uses his body as a shield. This prompts the boar to headbutt both of them together, and the impact of the attack sends them flying towards a waterfall. Ken immediately recognizes the waterfall from his first trip, so he braces himself and warns Suzuna to prepare for a fall. Once they make it to shore, Ken uses healing light on Suzuna's face so she doesn't become more hideous than she already is. Now separated from the rest of the group with no food, Ken worries while Suzuna urges him to abandon the mission and head home to Castle Town. However, Ken reveals to her that the weather will get bad in a few hours, so they should worry about finding a shelter for now. With that, he asks if she can sleep on the trees like her ancestors, the chimpanzees. Suzuna looks at the trees longingly but reveals that she had always wanted to climb trees but couldn't as she was never allowed. Sighing, Ken then tells Suzuna that they should just take shelter in the cave for now. Finding the idea agreeable, Suzuna changes her clothes and then uses her magic to catch fish for dinner. Next, Ken tells him to light a fire, which she does with ease. At nightfall, Ken, delighted to have some warmth, strips off his shirt and enjoys the fire. Meanwhile, Suzuna looks at Ken's body like she is Diddy, and he is Justin Bieber. Luckily for Ken, Suzuna becomes distracted by a group of venom monkeys. As she starts playing with them, Ken panics and tells her that the monkeys literally have venom as their first name, but Suzuna doesn't realize until too late. In the meantime, Kazuki learns from Leode that Suzuna's monster hunting mission has gone south and both her and Ken are currently missing. Panicking, he announces he is going to the forest himself when Rose arrives and reassures him that Ken won't die so easily and therefore Suzuna will live as well. Back at the cave, Ken states they should take turns sleeping, so Suzuna tells him to sleep first. However, just when the man is drifting to the land of unicorns and rainbows, she starts yapping, asking him if he wants to go back to Japan. Ken reveals that he wants to because he misses the heartburn that Bulldog Noodles gave him, but at the same time, he doesn't want to go back. Suzuna then admits that she doesn't want to return to their world as she lived an empty life there. She is free from the shackles society placed on her. Hearing her out, Ken discloses that he too wanted to escape his ordinary life, so in a way they are the same. Once they both lay out their hearts bare, they make a promise to protect Linger, the home they created themselves. The next morning, Blurren manages to sniff out Ken and the group is reunited with the exception of Corin. Suddenly, Blurren comes across his previous home, which makes Ken sad. However, after sniffing around, Blurren decides he wants to live with Ken so he can stay a big chungus. Pleased by the events, Suzuna extends a hand out to Ken and says they should head home, the one they chose. Arriving back to Castletown, Ken and Suzuna visit the palace where Leode apologizes for not sending a search party for them. They assure the king they are fine, but Ken ends up revealing that Rose sends him on dangerous missions like his mom has spare kids and would not mind losing one. Realizing his mistake, he tries to salvage the situation by saying he used to wander in the forest back in Japan. Leode then asks him how he's handling training with the rescue team, which prompts Ken to look at Rose. Knowing if he wants to keep his balls safe, he nervously tells the king that he is enjoying training. Rose flashes him a pleased smile, which confirms his belief that if he had said otherwise, he would gotten whooped. The king dismisses both Suzuna and Ken, but asks Rose and Siglas to stay behind. Once they step out, Ken shared with Suzuna that he is worried about why Leode asked their respective instructors to stay behind. Suddenly, Kazuki comes running towards them, with Princess Celia tailing right after him. Seeing this, Ken tells Kazuki that he sure got the princess crazy for the drake in his pants. Kazuki ignores the remark and instead reprimands them for making him worry. Celia joins the conversation, complaining that Kazuki was so worried about them that she couldn't get her usual glizzy. Suzuna laughs and tells Kazuki that he shouldn't treat a lady like that. Just when Ken jokingly tells Kazuki how Suzuna got bitten by a monkey, she covers his mouth so Kazuki keeps thinking she is still a girl boss. Later on, Kazuki even reveals to the gang that Rose was so confident that Ken wouldn't die that she was willing to bet her kidneys on it, which is why he didn't come after them. Realizing that he is a great friend, Ken pets Kazuki's shoulder and tells him to always stay loyal to the homies. Once Suzuna and Ken leave to get some rest, Celia tells Kazuki that their bond is beautiful. Thinking she is talking about Ken and Suzuna, Kazuki admits that they'd gotten closer, but the princess reveals that she was talking about his bond with Kazuki and Suzuna. He always looks happy when they're around, which prompts Kazuki to state that it's because Ken and Suzuna are from his world. Overcome by emotions, Celia asks if this means he has no room for her in his heart since he still treats her like a stranger. Stunned by her boldness, Kazuki looks at Celia in shock, which embarrasses her, so he assures the princess that he will treat her like she is his favorite e-girl. Back inside the palace, Leode states that he wants to discuss the bandits that attacked Suzuna and Ken. His minister, Sergio, steps forward, revealing that the bandits were camping in the forest because there were fewer monsters than usual when suddenly they were attacked by a bunch of flying boars. Leode notes that if they take the bandits' testimony in account, this means the boars were running from something terrifying that is headed straight for Linger. Now alerted, Siglas wonders if the Demon King's army is coming. Leode agrees that this could be the case, so he asks Siglas to notify all the units and prepare for battle. Once the minister and the knight commander leave to tend to their respective orders, King Leode turns to Ross and states that he wants her to go on a dangerous mission. Rose understands at once and says she knows he wants her to find out the whereabouts of the Demon King's army. Leode apologizes for putting her in danger, but Rose assures him that since she is basically the Rhea Ripley of this nation, she'll go at once. Before she turns to leave, Leode asks her to reconsider leading his troops, but she rejects the offer, stating that she is not pure-hearted as he believes her to be. Leode sighs and asks why she undermines herself so much. Filled with anger, Rose reminds the king that the last war she fought cost the lives of her most loyal companions. Even if she wants to forget and move on, her left eye will always be a reminder of what she lost. Leode tries to assure her that it wasn't her fault, but Rose disagrees, citing that she was arrogant to think she could lead a battalion of her own. This is why she now works for the rescue team, which focuses on saving others. Leode admits that the rescue team is valuable as it saved a lot of their men in the recent wardrobe, but Rose reveals that she has an ulterior purpose. She created the rescue team so she would have a subordinate who wouldn't die on her. Shocked, the king states that such a thing is not humanly possible. However, Rose claims that strict training paired with healing magic and mental strength has finally made Ken her ideal subordinate. He has become someone she can rely on. That night, Ken returns to the cottage when one of the NPCs named Gommel tells him that Rose has asked him to deliver a letter. Elsewhere, Amala pushes her subordinates to build a bridge despite the terrible weather hindering their work. Black Knight seeing this tells Amala that she is a pain to be around, which ticks her off. She scolds the giant tin can, who casually says that the other army leaders are so much cooler than her, as he walks away, leaving her fuming. Heralik tries to play the White Knight, but Amala dismisses him. Instead, she focuses her energy on the bridge because its completion will allow her to conquer the Linger kingdom for her master. Suddenly, one of the subordinates informs Amala that they've spotted an enemy scout. Cocky as ever, she states it doesn't matter because the bridge is about to be completed and within hours they'll be inside Linger. Suddenly, a log is thrown at the bridge, breaking the entire structure. Overcome by anger, Amila screams Rose's name, who runs away before she can be caught. When morning comes, Ken goes into the castle town to deliver the letter. He reaches a clinic where he is greeted by an ugly dork who claims to know him because of her brother Orga. She introduces herself as Fleur and announces she is at the age where she wants him to fertilize her eggs. Flustered, Ken tries to divert her attention by asking about her brother, so Fleur takes him to show Orga working on a young patient. Once he is done, he greets Ken, who relays the letter by Rose to him. While Orga gets reading, Fleur expresses to Ken that she misses training under Rose, revealing that when she and Orga joined, the rescue team was still new, so Rose was always enthusiastic about teaching them. Eventually, they grew tired of Rose's strenuous training and even came to fear her. Suddenly, a peasant urgently tells Orga and Fleur that a roof collapsed, injuring multiple people. They all rush out immediately as Orga asks Ken for his assistance. Slightly nervous, Ken thinks that he has only ever healed minor injuries that weren't as grave as open wounds, but now he must prepare himself for such situations, because war is coming. Sensing his hesitance, Orga urges Ken to believe in himself. This prompts him to remember that Kazuki told him how Rose has blind faith in him, so Ken puts his mind on the man's injury and manages to heal him. Later, he thanks Orga and heads home, while Orga reveals to Fleur that Rose wrote him the letter to inform him about the impending war. On his way, Ken encounters a mysterious girl who tells him to look into her eyes since only he can change the future. Unsure of what's happening, Ken looks and sees Black Knight raining death on the soldiers of Linger, including Suzuna and Kazuki. The foreshadowing ends as Ken takes a deep breath. The mysterious girl runs away after telling him that only he can save everyone. After recovering from the shock, Ken tries to learn more, so he chases after the girl while she looks at him secretly, hoping he would figure a way to save them all from ruin. After searching far and wide for her, Ken asks Thomas if he has seen an ugly girl with fluffy ears. Suddenly, Rose arrives and asks Ken why he is frolicking around. Thomas, who is scared of downy mommies, instantly takes off after seeing Rose. Ken makes fun of Rose, stating that her coochie probably has spider webs since no man wants to sleep with her. Of course, Ken gets a well-deserved beating from her, and once she is done straightening him out, he asks her what she has been up to. Rose reveals she was at the outskirts of Linger on scouting business. She informs him that she easily dislodged a bridge, which prompts Ken to state that only a muscle mommy like her can do such a thing. Rose doesn't take the flirty remark kindly, so she punishes Ken again. Later, on their way home, Ken asks if she knows anything about a girl with fox ears. Rose reveals that a beast girl of that appearance came to in Linger 2 years ago, which was surprising for many as she was quite young. When Ken asks why, Rose informs him that beast girls are attractive and possess magical abilities which make them a target of many kidnappers. Hearing this, Ken asks if they can also show anyone what the future holds, and Rose discloses there was a tribe of beast kin known as Oracles of Time who could see the future, but now they are rare and usually protected by other clans of the beast kin. When Rose asks why he is asking all of this, Ken lies and says he was just curious. She decides to not push him to talk any further and heads to meet King Leode on her own. Upon arrival, she informs Leode and Siglas about what she saw and did. Leode thanks her for delaying the enemy, but Rose insists that they don't have time as Amala will quickly build the bridge and infiltrate their land. The room falls silent. Understanding the gravity of the situation, King Leode then announces that he will inform the soldiers and the civilians about what's coming and asks Siglas to summon the two heroes. As Kazuki and Suzuna head towards the royal hall, they meet Celia, who greets them both. Seeing her, Kazuki fumbles and ends up being way too formal with her. Celia, hurt by Kazuki's unchanged behavior, quietly excuses herself, which prompts Suzuna to ask Kazuki if he is clapping that royal kitty. A few hours later, Ken tosses and turns, unable to sleep when he notices glowing balls outside his window. Upon investigation, he finds Kazuki calling him out. The two boys sit together as Kazuki finally admits that he is absolutely pissing himself at the thought of going to battle. He also reveals that when he was monster hunting, his legs froze in terror, making him realize just how weak he is. After hearing him out, Ken admits that he is the coolest guy that he knows. Back in Japan, her always remained calm under pressure, so he thought that he must never feel scared, but now he knows he is as human as he is. Kazuki looks at Ken in surprise, who assures him that it's okay to falter. He doesn't always have to live up to anyone's expectations. Kazuki then asks what he feels about the battle, and Ken admits that despite being scared, he will face the Demon King's forces head-on. Shocked once again, Kazuki asks why he isn't scared, especially since he came to this world only because the plot god didn't use the good old truck gun. Ken explains that he doesn't want to waste time thinking about that because he is here now and he intends to save the people dear to him, which includes him. Hearing this, Kazuki double slaps himself and states that he has been acting like a lame-o, but now he's going to take his man balls out and protect those he loves. The next morning, King Leode gives a speech which he copied from Commander Erwin. Naturally, all the soldiers are filled with energy and are ready to sacrifice their lives. On the day of the battle, Kazuki dressed in armor comes to meet Celia. He apologizes for intruding, but the princess expresses that she is happy to see him. In the meantime, Ken watches Flora trying her best to pet Blurren, who is way too Sigma for her. Orga then reveals that since it's Fleur's first war, she is trying her best to distract herself. Ton arrives and tells Ken Rose wants to see her in her room, which makes him wonder if it's finally breeding o'clock. However, when he arrives, Rose lectures him to be smart on the battlefield as he has to decide who to prioritize in times of crisis. With that, she tells him to wear the official uniform, which he proudly accepts. Rose admits that he only looks good in the uniform because his body is all toned up. She then warns him to not die or she'll kick his nuts until they are blue and black. With that said, the entire rescue team, including Flora and Orga, settle in a carriage to reach their designated campsite. On the way, Ken asks Rose about demons, and she reveals they are basically humans who weren't satisfied with normal wee-wees, so they decided to mate with bulls. Hence they became demi-humans with horns. However, they also possess more mana and physical strength in comparison to human beings. To further scare Ken, Rose reveals that their ordinary soldiers can easily solo their special knights. With that, she asks if he is scared now, but Ken cheekily states that he knows someone far more brutal than demons. Rose instantly knows it's her, so she cusses him out. Ken pouts and tells Rose that it's not fair she can't tolerate a light banter. In response, she shoots him a look which your mother gives you after seeing your report card. 5 years ago, King Leode gathers his important knights and ministers and informs them about demon sightings in the forest near Linger. He orders them all to stay alert and train harder as demons are stronger than human beings. Once the meeting is adjourned, Siglas asks Rose what she thinks about the matter. She replies that the demons probably want to expand their territories. Hearing this, Siglas decides to put his men through a strict training regimen, which prompts Rose to mock him as she calls him a Debbie Downer. On her way out, Rose gets lost in her thoughts while a purple-haired brat tries to get her attention. In the end, she receives a playful boink from Rose which makes her tear up. The weebo named All complains that her master is way too much of a meanie, which earns her another boink. The two walk together as All expresses that if demons do appear in Linger, she'll just throw Belle Delphine's bath water on them, which will exorcise them. Hearing her make fun of the situation, Rose warns her that underestimating an enemy is always fatal. They arrive at the cottage, where Rose tells her squad that she's going to put them on a strict schedule and they can thank All for that. Within seconds, the entire group gangs up on All, ready to beat her till she learns to shut her big mouth. A week later, Leode informs Rose that the demons are making organized strikes near the outskirts of Linger. He asks her to keep a vigilant eye and even use force if necessary. Rose accepts the orders and later relays the mission to her squad. She also informs them that since this mission is of high priority, she'll be joining them as well. Hearing this, the gang celebrates, stating that if she is there, they don't have to worry about getting injuries as she can heal them instantly. The next day, they head inside the dark forest where All announces her plan of scouring the west side of the forest. When nobody disagrees with her, she asks them if they want to throw in some jabs. To her surprise, everyone assures her they trust her with their lives. Later that night, when all her teammates are sleeping, All asks Rose why she chose her as the deputy commander. She continues by saying that she was always a stubborn girl who never listened to her superiors if their orders didn't sit right with her. That was until she met her and her brat days were over. This is why she respects her so much. However, Rose, being a tsundere, flicks All so hard it sends her flying. However, she does tell All that she chose her as deputy commander in full confidence because she never gave up. Just when All is about to get emotional, her squad wakes up and assures her they all love her but won't include her in the group chat. The following day, Rose and her squad witness a group of demons capturing a bunch of monster wolves. Their leader, Nero, instantly detects their presence, causing Rose to reveal herself. She tells them she doesn't want conflict, but Nero states that it's too late for that, and a full-on battle ensues between the two groups. Rose and Nero both charge at each other with full speed. The demon with his wind magic tries to take down Rose, who uses her healing and superhuman strength to put up a fight of her own. This causes Nero to acknowledge his opponent and summons his dark sword to take her down. In the meantime, All and the rest quickly find out the strength of a single demon soldier. However, despite the hardships, they make it their aim to show their enemies the power of Rose's squad. Back at the main event, Rose observes the gleaming sword and realizes it's imbued with curse, which means she absolutely can't not let Nero touch her with it. Fixing her resolve, she punches Nero so hard that he is forced to admit to Rose he is a wussy in comparison to her. He expresses that he wasn't well prepared given they were just monster hunting, but now they've been overwhelmed by a pest group of humans. Irritated, Rose asks why he is yapping so much in the middle of the battle, prompting Nero to go into another yap session about how humans who were once powerful and mighty and now weak and powerless. After returning home, Rose allows herself to grieve properly for the first time. A month later, Siglas pays Rose a visit. She reveals to him that even the king came to her humble abode to make sure she didn't unsubscribe herself from life. Rose instantly stops him and states that it was foolish of him to undermine her and her squad. Nero accepts his mistake, acknowledging that she might be their biggest hurdle in their dream. Curious, Rose asks what dream he is talking about, and so Nero reveals that their demon lord is soon going to wake up, and by his grace, this world will see the era of demonkind. Rose is startled as she sees Nero turn into an overheated ginger. Similarly, his subordinates display their own resolve by taking down two members of Rose's squad. One by one, they all start to fall dead, filling Rose with horror. She realizes she isn't going to make it, while Nero darkly states that he ordered his men to die fighting, which is why they'll fight till their bitter ends. Her mind starts to break, and in retaliation, Rose tries to get Nero, but he ends up blinding her in one eye. Desperate to regain her bodily control, Rose tries to heal her wound, but Nero tells her that it's useless as his sword can temporarily block magic. In the background, her teammates who are all gravely injured yell at Rose to heal them, but she finds herself helpless. Just when Nero is about to finish her off, all arise in time and shields Rose with her own life. The battleground falls silent as the once ferocious Rose falls to her knees, realizing all her loyal friends have perished and yet she is alive. Recalling memories of the past, Rose curses herself, knowing that her allies trusted her with their lives. They thought they were unbeatable if they had their commander next to them, as every wound was temporary thanks to her healing light, but now she has let them down and there is no point of return. Hearing her woes, Nero tells Rose that he will never forget her fallen comrades as they fought valiantly till the end. Now enraged, Rose gives Nero the 90s wives treatment by beating the living crap out of him. She angrily states that he is a coward who told his men to sacrifice their lives for a meaningless mission. Grabbing his sword, she continues to beat Nero to a pulp. Just when she is about to take him down, her body begins to break down. Rose tries to push herself, determined to avenge her allies when a young Amila appears from the trees, desperate to save her master. Upon seeing her, Nero scolds Amila for coming out of her hiding, which confuses Rose since Nero had just sacrificed his entire squad without blinking. Amila manages to free Nero, and as she tries to take him away, Rose yells at her to stop. However, in her, she sees all, which weakens her heart, allowing Amila to drag Nero to safety. Suddenly, Rose hears all calling for her. She rushes to her side and tries to heal her wound, but all knows it's useless. She assures Rose that she has no regrets and wouldn't have wished for a different end. With that, all stops breathing, and the next day, Rose blankly reports to King Leode and the rest about the arrival of the Demon King. Once she is finished reporting, she requests the king to revoke her knighthood as she no longer has the will to fight. On her way home, Rose is greeted by the parents of Josh, a knight who died fighting for her. Overcome by guilt, she apologizes to the parents who thank her for carrying their son back home, allowing them the chance of saying goodbye. With that, she admits she contemplated following her allies to the afterlife. This gets Siglas worried, and he grabs Rose by the collar. She assures him that she is just thinking about it and hasn't gone all emo yet. After letting go of her, Siglas remarks that her scars are healing. Rose reveals that the curse from Nero's sword was always supposed to be temporary. When he asks why she isn't healing her eye if that's the case, she becomes silent. Siglas leaves, knowing there's more than just one screw loose in Rose, but later Rose grabs her eye, stating that her broken eye is the proof of her sin that she let her comrades die. She also knows that ultimately, she cannot choose to die as all gave up her life to save her, so she wonders if she should dedicate her life to revenge. However, that idea doesn't sit right with her. Sighing, she tries to relax, but all she can see is the memories of her fallen comrades. Rose asks herself when did she become this weak when an imaginary all appears in front of her, stating that if they were all here, they'd laugh at how goofy she looks. She reminds her to always stay the same as that was her dying wish. Rose begins to cry, knowing she is tarnishing the deaths of her comrades. At that moment, she vows to never allow herself to become this weak again. She also realizes that in the near future, there will be a massive battle between the demons and the humans, but when that battle happens, she will be there, healing the wounded, making sure nobody dies on her watch. In the present, Rose suddenly tells Ken that she is glad to have him. Surprised, he asks if she finally got laid last night, but Rose scoffs and states that he has no idea how precious he is to her. Still trying to guess why she is being so sweet, Ken asks if her cucumber made her cream, which earns him a gut punch. Rose states that she has always wanted a subordinate like him, so she is extremely glad to have found him. The next day, Ken steps out of his tent, nervous about the upcoming battle. Outside, he meets Suzuna and Kazuki, who remark that since he is wearing the same uniform as Rose, they now look like that one cringy couple. Ignoring their jab, Ken asks them why they're up so early, and Suzuna reveals that they were going for a morning walk since they don't want to become a chairbender like you. She then asks what he thinks of her new armor, since Ken is only interested in seeing what's beneath all that metal. He expresses disinterest, but Suzuna continues to yap about how this armor is tailored to support her thunder magic. By the time she is finished, Ken tells her to put that mouth to a better use by giving him some oral support. Rose becomes angry and tells Ken she'll torture him by making him watch Boku no Pico after the battle. At this point, Ken begins to fear Suzuna more than whatever war is waiting for him. He yells at Kazuki to help him out, and his homie instantly arrives and tells Suzuna to calm her kitty down as Siglas is calling for them. Arriving at the spot, Siglas briefs the heroes that the Demon King's army will be here in an hour, and when that happens, they will first try to bamboozle them by throwing a magic strike. This will give them an edge on the enemy soldiers in combat. Siglas also urges the two heroes to make sure they bring back the heads of their enemies. Suzuna, eager for bloodshed, vows to bring back good news to King Leode. As Kazuki and Suzuna take their place, he asks her if she is pissing her pants. Suzuna confidently states that she is not pissing her pants but actually pooping in them. However, she also admits that she can't help but feel slightly excited too. This prompts Kazuki to remark that she sure has come a long way from the girl he used to know in Japan. Hearing this, Suzuna agrees that the past self is gone and this new her has even been accepted by Ken. Feeling left out, Kazuki asks why they left him out, which makes her chuckle. To tease him further, she tells Kazuki that if they ever return to Japan, she'll let him explore the new her. And with that, the battle begins. The mages fire their magic on the Demon King's army, while Kazuki and Suzuna back them up using their own powers. However, they quickly find out that the demons tricked them through illusion magic. Back with the rescue team, Rose tells Tong and the NPCs in black to carry the injured back to camp. Turning towards Orga and Fleur, she states their duty is to tend to the injured. Haruko will be guarding them, but if an emergency does come, then they must prioritize saving their own skins. And finally, she turns towards Ken and tells him they'll only participate in the battlefield when their soldiers are no longer capable to fight. Until then, they will heal and help Orga and Fleur. Just when Rose is done dispatching orders, Tong brings a wounded soldier. Seeing her, Ken's hands began to shake. He pulls himself together and starts doing his job when the injured knight reveals that she was thrown off by a giant snake. Ken instantly freezes, knowing it's probably the same snake monster as the one he encountered in the Forest of Darkness. Meanwhile, at the battlefield, Baljanak continues to terrorize the soldiers of Linger. Witnessing the scene from afar, the Dark Knight calls humans pathetic when a soldier dares to injure him, despite stabbing him. The soldier ends up meeting his maker while the Dark Knight heals automatically. As the brave soldier takes his last breaths, he tries to warn others of what menace is waiting for them. The Dark Knight calls him a pest for clinging on to his miserable life and is about to eliminate him. One of the NPCs throws a bunch of stink bombs and manages to take the wounded soldier with him. At first, the Dark Knight is surprised, but then he realizes Amula told him about the so-called kidnappers. This makes him chuckle darkly as he plans on raining death on them. Back at the rescue team, Rose tells Ken it's about time they join the battlefield and asks if he is nervous. Ken scoffs and states he was born for this. With that, the two healers Naruto run into the battle when Rose tells him a wounded soldier mumbled something about a knight cladded in black armor. Suddenly, Ken recalls the vision the mysterious fox girl showed him. He tries to shrug away the fear and anxiety he felt when he saw that scene when Rose gives him a piece of mind to help him focus. He thanks her and the two go their separate ways. In the meantime, Kazuki and Suzuna find themselves facing the Dark Knight. Kazuki, being a silly goose, attacks the monster despite Suzuna's opposition and gets injured. Suzuna then observes that the Dark Knight possesses the magic of reflection. If she hurls an attack at him, she will get hurt instead. After observing the Dark Knight, Suzuna comes to believe that if they attack him from the back, he won't be able to use his reflective powers. So she tries to put her strategy into action, and at first, Suzuna believes she is successful until the Dark Knight calls her gullible. Seconds later, Suzuna finds Kazuki lodged on the monster's sword like a dead sheep while she herself bleeds gravely. The Dark Knight then tells Suzuna to save her theories for Reddit as everything she believes about him is false. He can use his reflective power by will and there is simply not a soul who can take him down. Suzuna is gripped with fear. She sees Kazuki lying unconscious in his own pool of blood while the Dark Knight casually calls them a bunch of wussies. Suzuna finally breaks down and recalls the time she first met Ken. That's when their lives changed forever. She was happy when she found herself in another world as she could finally escape from the people who expected her to be on her game, but what truly cured her sadness was having Ken accept her as she is. In the meantime, the soldiers of Linger cry in panic upon seeing their heroes fall in battle. The demons, thinking it's their win, urge the Dark Knight to finish the heroes once and for all. But just when the Dark Knight is about to land a fatal strike, Ken arrives and delivers an attack so powerful that it sends the enemy tumbling down. Turning to his friends, Ken looks in horror, wondering if he is too late. Without waiting another moment, he uses healing light and seconds later, Rose regains consciousness. However, their worries are far from over as the Dark Knight begins yelling in anger. To everyone's shock, they find out the formidable Dark Knight is a girl. When she tries to lash out on them, Ken picks up his friends and runs to safety. On the way, he assures Rose that Kazuki's wounds are almost healed up and he should be waking up soon. Suzuna thanks him and then tells Ken about the Dark Knight's reflective power. However, she points out that his earlier attack definitely made that bis salty, which means it worked. At first, Ken complains that having such power is basically cheating, and it would have been better if he was just reincarnated as a goth mummy's fishnets. It doesn't take long for the Dark Knight to catch up to Ken and the crew. With vengeance laced in her voice, she tells Ken that she will pay him for hurting her earlier. He gulps, knowing he doesn't actually want to fight the Dark Knight, but as long as she remains in the battlefield, he won't be able to do his job as a healer. So Ken gathers his courage and tells Suzuna to look after Kazuki. With that, he runs toward the Dark Knight, who uses her armor to attack him, but to her surprise, her deadly spikes are rendered useless on Ken. Meanwhile, Kazuki wakes up and Suzuna fills him in on how their loser friend arrived in time and saved them from having a cup of tea with the German painter in hell. Kazuki then watches Ken fighting head-to-head with the Dark Knight, surprised that her attacks had nothing on Ken. As the two heroes observe the battle from afar, they realize the Dark Knight's kryptonite is Ken's healing magic. This makes Suzuna chuckle as she states that this is definitely the wrong way of using healing magic. Meanwhile, the emo brat goes crazy after taking punches after punches. She unleashes a scary amount of mana, but Ken assures his friends he got this and runs towards the core of the knight's armor. Then using a healing punch, he completely destroys her armor and takes the victory for himself. Ken quickly heals the other injured soldiers who reveal to him that since he defeated the Dark Knight, the demon army quickly retrieved. Scared of how powerful he is, hearing this, Ken looks at the unconscious Dark Knight who now looks like an ugly OnlyFans hoe who got destroyed by 10 dudes. Feeling happy, Ken basks in the glory when Suzuna asks him about the healing punch. He humbly states that it is a technique Rose taught him right before the war began. After hearing him yap, Suzuna thanks him for saving them from getting clapped to death by a 4 feet tall demon brat. Suddenly, Rose arrives and Suzuna excuses herself, allowing Rose to check up on Ken. Upon learning he defeated the Black Knight and saved the heroes, Rose tells Ken he did a good job and tells him they should retreat back. Elsewhere, Amila learns that the Black Knight has been captured. Her eyes widen in disbelief as she asks the informant if it was Rose, but he reveals that it was a man with emo hair. Frustrated, she turns toward Hyrule and tells him they are retrieving their troops until she has more information on the boy who took down her strongest ace. Before Hyrule can call back Baljanak, he sees Kazuki and Suzuna eliminate his precious reptile. In the meantime, Rose and Ken heal the wounded when she tells him that if it wasn't for him, his friends would have died and they would have been on the losing side. At that moment, Ken realizes all that intense training Rose put him through was to prepare him for this day. When he begins to sob, Rose puts a hood on him so she can block his ugly face from her vision. After crying like a loser, Ken falls on Rose's mommy milkers. She realizes he is out of mana and allows him some quality time with her chest pillows, something you losers would never get to experience even in your next life. Turning to his humble abode, Ken cries to his Lebubu about how he had a tough time in the war. However, he perks up at the thought of receiving a reward from King Leode since in the past, he was so stupid that he could fail his own blood test. Blurrin ignores everything Ken says and continues to eat his favorite snacks, which makes him realize that his fat bear has become more round than he already was. Suddenly, Gommel arrives and tells Ken that he is summoned by the king again. Before going, he also warns Ken to be careful on his way. Confused, he asks Gommel what he means by that, but the NPC refuses to say anything further. Ken soon realizes what Gommel meant as the moment he arrives in the castle town, he is swarmed by the civilians praising him for his bravery. They offer him all sorts of treats, making him nervous, but among them is the mysterious fox girl who ignores Ken and makes her way of the crowd. After finally freeing himself, Ken arrives at the castle where Ruku thanks him for saving his comrades in the battlefield, and in response, Ken asks him to not be so formal with him. He also tells Iruku that he was always a reliable bodyguard and offers his gratitude for his services. Hearing Ken praise him, Thomas spawns out of nowhere and starts singing Iruku's praises, which makes him awkward and asks Ken to just go inside the freaking palace already. Upon arrival, Siglas and King Leode request Ken to help them interrogate the Dark Knight. Recalling that underneath the scary armor, she was just a little girl, Ken asks if they're having trouble with her. To his surprise, Siglas reveals the Dark Knight doesn't hold any love for the demon army and has been very cooperative. However, they still need to get critical intel out of her, which she refused to give them as she wants him to interrogate her. On the way down to the dungeon, Ken is accompanied by Suzuna and Siglas. When Ken asks why she is coming with them, given how useless she was, Suzuna proudly states that she is willing to be his meat shield if push comes to shove. Siglas then talks about how his healing magic proved to be deadly against the Dark Knight's black magic. Hearing this, Ken begins to panic, realizing that she must be in great pain. He hurries to her prison and asks if she is hurt. The Dark Knight admits that she is aching everywhere and this pain that she is experiencing is foreign to her, as she had never experienced something like this before. When Ken asks why she wants to see him, the girl reveals that she wanted to meet the person who clapped her so badly. Having considered the risk, Ken asks Siglas to open the prison door as he must go inside to help the young knight. At first, the Dark Knight resists, but Ken urges her to let him in, and once she agrees, he uses his healing light, causing her armor to vanish. Realizing the warmth and love coming from Ken, the girl begins to cry and tells Ken that she has never felt this way before. The next day, Ken's protein-addicted cougar states that she is going to increase the intensity of his training as the demon army will likely attack again. After throwing a tantrum, Ken gets told by Rose that he cannot rely on healing magic alone to treat his wounds, as there are weapons imbued with cursed energy that render his healing abilities useless. Therefore, he must learn battle tactics against such formidable weapons or else he'll get yeeted. After 3 whole days of getting treated like a rag doll, Ken finally gets a break and decides to visit the Dark Knight. She looks at him with annoyance as he yaps about Rose, but once she tells him to leave her alone, Ken allows her to rot alone. In the meantime, Rose stands in front of King Leode, who asks her for another favor. Moments later, she arrives in the dungeon and tells the Dark Knight that she has two options. She can live the rest of her life in this ugly prison cell where she won't get toilet paper, or she can come with her and become a part of the kingdom of Linger. To further show how kind she is, Rose gives the girl a hard boink and then places a magic collar on her which is designed to seal mana. After knocking her out, Rose carries her back to her house where Ken learns of her plans to train the Dark Knight. That night, Rose reveals to him that King Leode intends to send him and his friends as messengers to other kingdoms so humanity can stand a chance against the Demon Lord's full potential. The next day, as Ken takes a stroll in the castle town, he realizes he now has spans. He meets with Suzuna but ignores her when he spots the fox girl. Running to her, he holds her up in the air, but the fox girl states that it's time for him to pay her back. Introducing herself as Amako, the fox girl reveals that her mother is terribly sick and the only one who can save her is him. Suzuna, observing the scene, hurries to pet Amako, which makes Ken yell at her. In the meantime, the Dark Knight trains with the other NPCs who mock her for being a slow poke. Annoyed, she calls them goblins for how ugly they look. Suddenly, Rose arrives and spanks the Dark Knight hard for slacking. On the other hand, Suzuna learns that it was Amako who showed Ken a vision of her and Kazuki dying. Once the background story has been covered, Amako reveals that she had to leave her house and search for a healer since her mother is bedridden with illness. In the beast community, they do not have any credible healers, that's why she arrived at Linger, hoping a healer would help her. When Ken asks why she didn't visit the clinic owned by Orga and his sister, Amako reveals that in order to reach the Beastkin's territories, they'll have to make a long journey for which Orga and his sister aren't fit. Suzuna points out that she could have asked Rose, but Amako states that she is scared of her, and besides that, she had a vision of Rose rejecting her. After pondering for a while, Ken tells Amako that he wants to help, but he must ask Rose first. However, when he reveals the entire tale to Rose, she states that anything involving the Beastkin is a serious matter as no kingdom is allowed to have them in their lands, given their special talents. But knowing Ken, Rose decides to help him out by taking the matter up to King Leode. Later that day, the Dark Knight refuses to touch her food, so Ken gifts her a diary that'll help her feel less lonely. The next day, she starts training more seriously, but is horrified to see how intensely Rose trains Ken. Noticing the Dark Knight's interest in Ken, Rose tells them both that from now on she'll get trained by Ken. After she goes away, Ken finally asks for her real name and she reveals that it's Felm. Thinking it's no biggie, Ken becomes distracted by Blurrin, which ticks off Felm since sharing names is important for her. She asks him if he's not going to say anything more, but Ken states that since her name is not Rumpelstiltskin, it doesn't matter. Hurt, Felm starts running to escape the embarrassment and ends up collapsing later. That night, as Felm tries to find snacks, she overhears a conversation between Rose and Ken about him going on a journey to deliver letters to other kingdoms. Upon learning such a crucial piece of information, Felm wakes up early and runs off. In the meantime, Ken and Amako arrive at the castle where King Leode wholeheartedly thanks her for saving their kingdom. With that, he tells Ken that they've decided to grant his wish so he'll be allowed to visit Mielark, a kingdom which is next to the Beastkin's territory. Amako thanks the king while Rose quickly catches Felm. She explains that at first she thought she was going to warn the demons about their plans, but since she is camping out in the forest, it must mean that she was hoping to severely join Ken in his mission. Felm blushes and asks Rose why she isn't worried about him, to which she reveals that Ken is basically a war god now who has healing properties, so the only ones who need to fear is his enemies. That evening, Rose approaches Ken and tells him that going on this mission will change him, but she has faith in him. This makes him tear up and he becomes absolutely sure that he is going to stay in this world and protect those he loves. Do you want to live as a healer in another world? If so, comment tomatoes, and as always, if you like this recap, follow and watch this video here.